Before she became a myth, she was a woman. Before she was buried beneath centuries of misunderstanding, she walked beside the living Christ, not as a servant, but as an equal. Mary of Magdala, a name the world learned to stain, because holiness was never meant to wear a woman's face. She was not the weeping sinner that later storytellers painted her to be. She was a scholar of sacred mysteries, a woman who listened, not with her ears, but with her spirit. She understood what even the disciples struggled to grasp, that the kingdom Christ spoke of was not a place, it was a state of awakening. While others looked to the heavens, Mary looked within. Where they sought signs, she sought silence. And in that silence, she found truth. In the lost Gospel of Mary, discovered centuries later in the sands of Egypt, her voice rises again, calm, radiant, unapologetic. She speaks not of sin or punishment, but of knowledge, memory, and liberation. To her, salvation was never obedience, it was remembrance. The men called her dangerous, because she spoke as one who had seen. They asked her, "Why do you speak of things that cannot be seen?" And she answered, "Because I have seen them where you have not looked." That is what made the church tremble, not her body, not her past, but her mind. Because in her understanding, power was no longer theirs to give, it was everyone's to remember. Her rise was not of thrones or temples, it was the rise of consciousness itself, and for that, they called her forbidden. They said her words were too strange to be divine, too liberating to be safe, and yet they could not burn them all. Hidden in the fragments of the Gospel of Mary, there lies a vision, part memory, part revelation. Mary speaks to the disciples after the death of Christ, and they tremble, lost, afraid. But she does not weep. She tells them of a vision, a message that came from beyond form, from the living light itself. "The Savior has prepared us for all things," she said, and told me, "There is no sin, there is only forgetfulness." Those words struck the room like thunder. No sin? Then what would become of guilt, of control, of obedience? If humanity remembered that divine spark within, who would kneel? That was her prophecy, not of destruction, but of remembrance. That a time would come, when the world would once again awaken to its origin, when men and women would remember that the divine does not dwell in temples, but in the pulse behind their own eyes. She saw an age, not of fire but of revelation, when the soul would pierce through the 7 veils of illusion, fear, desire, ignorance, pride, confusion, judgment, and attachment. And when those veils fell, humanity would rise again, not through war or wrath, but through awakening. Her prophecy was not meant to overthrow kingdoms, it was meant to dissolve them, because no empire can rule those who have remembered their own light. That is why the prophecy made the church tremble, because Mary spoke of a faith that needed no walls, a kingdom that needed no crown, a God that needed no permission to live within you. And for the keepers of power, that was the most dangerous truth of all. Power, when built on fear, cannot survive the awakening of love. And Mary Magdalene's prophecy, that humanity could know the divine directly, shattered the foundation of control. Imagine it, a woman standing before men who claimed the right to define God, saying, "You do not need me. You do not need any man. You need only remember." That was not heresy, it was liberation. For centuries, religion had been a chain, disguised as salvation. One that taught that divinity was distant, that heaven must be earned through submission. But Mary spoke of a truth that made such systems tremble, that the divine is not reached through obedience, but through awakening. Her words erased the need for hierarchy. If every human being carries the same spark, what becomes of the gatekeepers? If heaven is within, who owns the key? The early church fathers, building a structure to preserve authority, knew this truth could not survive in daylight. So they buried her. They turned the teacher into a sinner, the enlightened into the fallen, the voice of truth into a lesson of shame. But suppression never kills truth. It only buries it deeper, where it grows roots in silence. The prophecy terrified them, because it promised a future where people would no longer fear their Creator, but unite with it. It spoke of a love that was not mediated by ritual or rule, a love that could make every soul its own temple. And history shows, nothing threatens power like self-realization, because when a person remembers that the divine lives in them, no throne can command them, and no doctrine can define them. That was the terror behind her words, not rebellion but remembrance. Because remembrance is the end of control.